Matt, you've got the first one up.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk briefly. I know we have other things to talk about too, but just assigning weights. I've kind of gotten in a bad habit of just throwing weights on there without without much thought. We do have a process documented of how we used to do it. I think that we haven't been doing that the whole time I've been around, but I think it might be time to slowly get back to that. Now I say that with the caveat that I'm not going to be around for 3 months, so I don't want to introduce a bunch of new processes right before, or any new processes as I leave. But I think just in a nutshell, the process is basically in the milestone before and assign engineers to look at any issues that don't have weights and try to spend a little bit of time, time box, so don't spend a ton of time on it, but spend some time just reviewing the issue and making sure it's ready for development and assigning a weight at that point. And then when we get to the planning towards the end of a milestone, hopefully everything that we're planning on has weights associated with it. So yeah, I don't know if we want to think about doing that again. It takes a little more planning up front than I've been doing. So yeah, so we'll start the discussion. Kai, if you have questions.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I think this would be good. I guess the question would be like, how do we do this? Because this would require us to be even sort of further ahead in planning than we typically are. And also have like maybe more predictable work, which I think we have some very predictable work. I think it's the things that show up sort of towards milestone planning that maybe aren't necessarily clearly weighted. And like, I guess is how do we solve for that one maybe?
Right. Yeah. I think there's always going to be those cases where it's towards the end and yeah, things urgently come up that need to be in the next milestone or in the current milestone even, as that happens occasionally too. So how do we make sure we get at least somewhat accurate weights on those? And I don't have a great answer, but I think your second question there is that, or comment is, yes, I think during the allocation, we weren't really doing this because we were just kind of picking up whatever the next security issue was specifically. So I didn't have to really think about what the weight was, but. Andre?
Yeah. So last time I chatted, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So the last time I checked, I think the editor team was doing something where each week they would attribute the nature of the weekly meeting to different tasks. And I think they did something like on the third week or the fourth week of every month, they would have a backlog refinement session during the weekly. So I'm not suggesting we copy the same thing, but what that ended up doing was that regularly the team was gathering, and this is like engineering manager and ICs, we get all up in a call and just refine the backlog a little bit about the work that's up to be scheduled, which goes back to Kai's point that for this to work, we would have to be a little bit ahead of the planning, which is not a bad thing. But yeah, so just wanted to throw it out there if it's something that we would actually want to consider. I'll add my second point, which is on the front end, we usually do this on the milestone planning exercise. And we double check with engineers the assumptions made on some of the issues, which is bound to have some imprecision built into it. So I think it's a bit of a scale. How often do we want to do it to have a higher precision, which will come at a cost of capacity from the engineers if it's regular. So would we want to do something regular?
Kickoff planning, you guys rehashing during kickoff planning?
No. So the weights, we use them to put them on the milestone in the conversation with you. From the moment that it's committed to deliverables, we don't care about weights anymore.
Okay.
Right. So we don't adjust them from then on. What we do is when I'm looking at the issues before I have a conversation with you is I'll throw an assumption at it, and
Yeah,
I'll
right.
ping the relevant engineer to double check on it, which sometimes, yeah, there's adjustments. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. The other part is we put weights on complexity, not on time. So it's sometimes the 3 doesn't mean the same thing for different engineers in terms of time, but as a complexity thing, it's still applicable. We get around that by using a little bit of a throttle thing and different capacities per engineer when we're doing the capacity planning and all that stuff. But it's imprecise, but it's a nice effort so far. If you want to have more precision, I think we can try to have some more regular refinement sessions. We can, but that again, we need to have work scheduled and prepared for the upcoming weeks. I don't know how that sounds.
Have you, I guess, Matt, have you tried the process as documented?
No, at least not in the last 6 months, probably. I think
Okay.
I think even in talking to some of the engineers, I think we kind of fell off that process even before I started. So I don't think I've done a kind of ad hoc on some, but nothing really formal. So we don't have to solve this right now either. But I think it's something that we should start thinking about just to make planning a little more accurate as well.
Yeah. Do you want to pick it back up, I guess, when you get back? I know it's like not, it feels like it would be hard to do while you're out anyways.
Right.
Because that's either more work for Andre or like picking up one more thing for Andre or picking up one more thing for me.
Yeah.
Well, if anything, while it's out, we are going to have to try leaning more on the ICs anyway. So what that will give us is time to experiment. And while Matt is out, I'll have to find a way to put weights on issues. And I won't have the expertise to put them myself. So I'll have to ping ICs to help me out on those weighting of the issues. So I'm not sure if this will be enough, like following the process as is documented. So I'll probably throw some flavors into it and see how it goes. Because like if it's on the 4th of the development month, that means that all the issues for the next milestone need to be in by the 4th, which it's unrealistic. So what I can say is I'll give it a try to have something similar to this and then report back once you're back. And keep it updated.
Thank you. Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up, though. I think I'm happy to figure out how to support. So we can give things some tries while you're out, and then maybe we'll have something when you get back. Maybe it'll be a new process.
Yeah. That's totally fine with me. But yeah, I think I appreciate trying something new and seeing. I mean, this is kind of forcing the habit a little bit, or forcing the process a little bit while I'm out anyway. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Cool. The other one I'm just copying up here. I offered this up in the UX meeting yesterday, and I'll offer it up here. If anyone wants to share sync feedback on attention requests, we can do that on this call now. If nobody wants to share anything and they want to go comment on the issue, then this is my reminder that issue exists, and I'm looking for feedback from people. So we'll give it a moment, and then we can either move on, or if someone wants to talk, we'll let them talk.
I have some things as well people are thinking. So one of the things that I've been telling people when we've discussed this in the past couple of days is that I personally haven't seen the feature itself because I was out. So once we're done with all the adjustments that we're doing right now on the automations and the copy and make sure that like it's simplified, I think it would be important to have the team exposed to the final state of the feature before committing to any decision. So I think the team needs to see the final product, which potentially there's a proposition there that I'm planning on putting in an issue, which is to do a rehearsal. So these kinds of workflows work for the whole team. So we would have to have the whole team follow that process of you leveraging the attention requests. And perhaps we can run a rehearsal for a whole milestone, see how that feels to actually go through the code review. So I don't know, Thomas, if you have any thoughts on that, because that would give us a real world feel of it. That's my first part. Second part, more for Ben and Annabelle. I'm not saying for like the release of the feature, I don't think it would be a blocker, but have we thought of doing a tour of the feature itself to users to onboard them onto the feature? Like some of those things, like it highlights the feature. So this is new. You want to skip the tour or take the tour and then take them through the bits and pieces of the feature itself. Is that something that we have thought about?
We do have that. When you clicked on the dropdown for the first time, there was a pop-up that highlighted the new requested attention requests item, and then you could dismiss that little popover. I think that was the component. I wasn't involved much in the design, so I don't know if a tour type thing was explored. I will say, personally, I don't like tours. I think I always does anyone really like them? Like they go to the app for the millionth time and then they're like, oh, now I have to learn this new workflow. I feel like usually you just say stop, but that might just be me. I don't know what the growth team has been doing in terms of like onboarding wizards, tours, that kind of stuff. They're not my favorite, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. Just personal preference.
And more about like people who are confused, having a way to, hey, what's this again? Which I guess probably the popover that you mentioned could address that in a way. So it doesn't have to be a full-fledged tour. If we just answer that question, like, what is this exactly? Because changing of habits is always like a painful thing. So people are going to have to adjust to a new workflow. So that's always going to be a little bit friction. So, okay. I'll share my thoughts on the issue and see what we come out of it. Thomas, did you have any thoughts on the rehearsal for a full milestone? Sorry, I don't know if you're there.
When you say rehearsal, I'm sorry, can I just go back to what you were saying about releasing it for everyone for a milestone? That would still mean turning that feature on for all of GitLab.com and
right. Not necessarily. Wait.
No, we're making, so Phil and I have been working on augmenting the feature flag to support selectively rolling it out. It is not scalable in any manageable way because it has to be done on a per user basis, and it introduces risks. It introduces risks if there are people on teams that have it and don't have it, because in theory, I would have a UI that would allow me to assign attention, and you would not have a UI that would know that I've assigned you attention and would not get any notifications or know that that's happened. And so it's fairly risky. We're in the event that we decide to proceed with turning this on in some way, shape, or form, it gives us a way to potentially pilot it with some smaller groups. I think our own group might be challenging. I've considered maybe Giddily as an isolated team. Runner is also a fairly isolated team. Groups that like have their own separate projects that don't necessarily work in the main GitLab code base are good internal examples. And then externally, there are customers who have asked for the feature back since it's been turned off. That might also be valuable people to pilot and continue to like speak to and talk to about it. So there is an option. It is not, the engineering is not done, and like I think we think it will work like we expect it to, but we're not actually sure that turning it on for a single user works like we expect it to until we sort of do that.
Yeah, that sounds. If we can get it to work, I feel like that's a good way to run it, like a rehearsal for a specific team. Because I was thinking about, even if we do it on our own team, there's still a chance of you sending your review to someone outside of the team. But if you know that you're running the rehearsal, then you'd know. That's why it's kind of like a half and half, right? It's not a real world scenario where you're experimenting the feature and you didn't develop it. So most of us already have some exposure to it. So yeah, external team isolated sounds a good idea. If we can get it to work, we can reach out to the managers and see how they think about it, and set it up. So I guess the question there is, can we scope it in that way? And so yeah, I'll check on it.
What is it that you are looking for in terms of this issue that has that due date of today?
Good question. I think for people, and I segment people, I think for people like you and Ben, who have been involved in many of the conversations, potentially nothing additional. What I wanted to do was make sure that the team who has been around for a long time and has worked on this and hypothesized and dealt with early design and feedback and like how we got to this was given an opportunity to provide thoughts and feedback there, and based on their experiences of having it on and sort of the original conversations that we had, like, you know, sort of that kind of thing. I think for you and Ben, if you've got more thoughts, great. I don't know. We talked a lot last week, so I'm not sure I need to, to talk to either one of you anymore right now.
Yeah, I wasn't planning on adding anything else to the issue just because I didn't want to derail and go in the same place that I have already said. But going forward, you know, today's got that due date. Sorry, the issue's got the due date of today. So when are we going to make a decision on what to do? Are we still waiting to figure out if we can pilot this as a rehearsal for Gitlab, or when are we going to make some decisions? When are you going to make some decisions, Kai?
Yeah. So on top of the feature flag work that's being done, there's another like blocking feature issue of work that was actually a hard UX requirement before we turned it back on, which is the toast notifications piece. That work is not done, so I need to follow up with Phil. He started it and then hasn't revisited it, so I just need to double check. So I'm buying time with engineering work. At the same time, for those that don't know, Marcel has been rebuilding prototypes of both an original solution idea that was never validated and the current one that is what is engineered. The plan is to quickly run those through some testing to see if we can glean any additional feedback between sort of two proposed paths that exist. Whether or not they're complete solutions or go far enough isn't necessarily the point. The point is more to understand, are we glaringly missing something with what we've implemented versus what other options exist? Those prototypes are done. I think the research is in user testing and it's awaiting Ben's feedback. So in theory, that will go off tomorrow, Friday, and we should have data back fairly quickly by mid next week, early next week, probably, based on how I've seen user testing go before for unmoderated tests. And so my plan is to look at that in combination with all of the UX feedback that's been given and all of I have read people's feedback in the issue. I've refrained, I think, for the most part from saying anything on people's feedback so far. So sort of go through some of that and get back to that, and then see where we're at this time next week, end of next week, in terms of what we think is the appropriate next step.
Okay, and then this is the small thing that likely won't change anything, but if we do end up turning it on again for a small group of users, depending on when that is, Phil and I have also been working on the sidebar updates, which we're hoping to release behind a feature flag in 15.0. So we'll need to make sure that attention requests in the sidebar still works and looks the same.
Yes.
It's pretty exciting stuff. The sidebar.
It's very exciting.
Yeah. Phil was
Cool.
giddy. That's all I'll say.
So am I. This has been a really fun milestone, except for everything that happened last week. For me and Phil, it's been a fun milestone.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Awesome. Anyone else on attention request? Ready for number 4? Ready for number 4. All right. I just wanted to highlight this one, which is the forks relationship broken. This is primarily a backend thing, but I think Mark and Patrick are potentially going to look at it, Matt, and I'm adding it to your radar and making sure we voice this concern here. I think one of the things that we're going to need to do, well, I think we've confirmed that the security fix is part of what has changed this behavior. And so we might, on top of needing to figure out what we're going to do, it might make sense to start getting conversations with delivery going, because we have now backported a bug 3 milestones, and we actually can't even touch the 3rd one back in terms of our normal backports anymore, right? We'd already be well past our ability to get a fix into that. And so we're going to need to start some conversations with delivery. And so I don't know if you can do those or if you can make sure that whoever picks this up does, but we're going to need to figure out what our options are for once we get a fix, how we deal with the backport situation, because that is going to be, I think, a little bit contentious there. And we're going to have, I know we already have a TAM asking about where the backports are going to land. So like, I know we're going to have people asking where the backport's going to land for a fix here.
Okay, yep, I'll talk to, I know Mark looked into it a little bit, but then he was traveling most of the day yesterday. And then Patrick picked it up and he started looking at it. So yeah, we'll try to figure out not only how to fix it, but then also how to get it back into all of the right versions that we've backported. Okay, yep, I can drive that a little bit.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that one's a big concern. And then I'm going to stop recording just because we're going to name a customer. We're going to talk about the last one, which is also just sort of highlighting here.